PK here. Today I thought I'd do a top 5 most nostalgic games. Very recently my friend Church had tagged me, what are your top 5 most nostalgic games? It's an interesting thing, what does nostalgia mean? I guess nostalgia is good memories. I guess I would classify it. I don't know how far back that nostalgia has to go to be nostalgic. It's an interesting question to say the least, but this was a hard list to make, honestly, because there's so many games I'm nostalgic about. How I determine what is most nostalgic, I don't even know if these are truly my most nostalgic games, but I think there are 5 games I know I'm nostalgic about. That's why I was like, this is the list I'm going to use. These are the games I'm going to talk about. So let's start it here. And I'm going by the order of when they came out. So first we're going to start in the NES era. This is probably the game I played the most on the NES. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. This game is fantastic. It's just good straight beat 'em up action, and it's a really enjoyable experience. You can play as whatever Ninja Turtle you like. It's really straightforward. It's a lot of fun. It's not overly complicated. It's very linear. I did a review of this game. One of the very first early reviews I ever did when I reviewed all 4 Ninja Turtles games on the NES. And I have to say, it's still one of my favorites. It's a game I always go back and play. I don't know what I could say that I have not said about this game already. It's a fantastic game. Up next, we got the Super Nintendo. Probably one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo of all time is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. I've already talked about this game in great detail from several of my videos, including my literacy narrative. If you haven't seen my literacy narrative, go check that out, actually. It was a class project I did about, games that inspired me to take a more active role in reading and stuff like that. And what can I say about this game? I had it when it was brand new. My mom had actually ordered it from the JCPenney catalog, when JCPenney still sold video games. I don't think they do anymore that I know of, but yeah, this is a fantastic game. It was one of the very first games I ever beat. And in fact, this was the very first game I ever beat on a console. I don't count like Game Boy games. I remember I beat some Game Boy games prior to this, but it was the first console game I ever beat, and that's why it has such a special place in my heart. I never knew what the heck an RPG was till I played this game, and it made me kind of a little more curious, at least, about other RPGs. It's just, it's great. It's a great beginner's RPG, and it incorporates familiar faces such as Mario, Princess Toadstool, Bowser. This is before she was called Peach, actually, interestingly enough. But I remember I even got a Nintendo Player's Guide for this, and I remember just reading that thing religiously, and I had such a great time. I remember beating the Axum Rangers, and who was that one guy? He's basically the hardest character to beat in the game, and you get like this special weapon from him after you beat him. Basically, he's harder than Smithy. He's in like this door in Monster Attack. It's called, yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I guess as far as Super Nintendo goes, my most nostalgic game is unquestionably Super Mario RPG. It was a tough fight too. It was between this and Mortal Kombat 2. I think would have been, as far as my favorite Super Nintendo games that I have personal nostalgia for go. And it's really close, but Mario RPG won in the end. So up next, the Nintendo 64. There's so many good Nintendo 64 games that I played. And it was basically the third video game system I ever owned. And I had to go with the very first game I ever played on the N64, and that's Banjo-Kazooie. This is another game I actually mentioned in my literacy narrative, believe it or not. Banjo-Kazooie is such a fantastic collectathon game, And I played this before I played Super Mario 64, so after I got done playing this, and then you go to play Super Mario 64, and you're like, the controls aren't quite as good, but it's nonetheless Super Mario 64 is still an awesome game. There's no denying that. Heck, it ushered in the whole 3D platformers of that time, and I was such a huge, basically I never even owned a PS1. Actually, I had friends who had owned a PS1, and I'd play their PS1, but I never had one of my own. I was always a very die-hard Nintendo guy, very, very loyal to Nintendo. So that's my that's the third most nostalgic game, I guess. It's funny, I've talked about PS1 before, and I love the PS1. And one game, in fact, I played on PS1, like on a demo disc actually. The first time I played this was Metal Gear Solid for PS1. I played it on a demo disc with my friends Andy and Shane, and I remember thinking, man, this game is freaking awesome, you know. And you know, years later I saw it and I'm kind of like, wow, the graphics look kind of dated, you know. And this was like early 2000s, and of course I'm still a very die-hard Nintendo guy. I won't buy anything but a Nintendo system. So I bought the GameCube, and when this came out to the GameCube, I was freaking psyched. Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes. Oh man, what an awesome remake of a game, honestly. This is actually one of my top 5 most wanted games that need an HD remake. So far, the only of those, in fact, of all those top 5, the only ones so far that I've gotten is Twilight Princess, but I'm still hoping for this someday. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but, you know, it's like they basically used, you know, the Sons of Liberty engine, you know, and made this game really awesome, you know. And some people still prefer the original. I, on the other hand, I prefer the Twin Snakes, you know, because this is also one of the first games I ever beat on the GameCube, you know. And there's just so many great things about it. I mean, I love that you can go into first person. The graphics are incredibly updated, you know, to look more like Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. And there's like after you actually go through the game, you know, you can actually rewatch all the cinema scenes. So if you'd already beat the game and you were kind of bored one night and just wanted to relive the entire Metal Gear Solid story, you could do that. You could just watch all the cinema scenes. So freaking cool. I mean, nowadays you can do that on YouTube, but there's something special about watching it after, you know, you've completed the game, you know, and it's just, what an awesome game. Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes. Now, after playing Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes, you know, I still really was not a Sony guy at this point. You know, I think I really became a Sony guy around 2006, 2008-ish, you know, I mean. And I was like, and I was still pretty diehard Nintendo guy, but I'm like, I'm not going to buy a Sony product. I'm not going to do it. But I really want to play the sequel to Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes. I just want to play that so damn bad. So what did I do? I went out and bought an Xbox, a used one from GameStop, which, looking back, that was a poor choice because those things were notorious for breaking down, especially the GameStop ones, but here and there. So what did I get? Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance. Oh man, I remember playing this game for the first time. I mean, I'd seen it played before. My friend Drew actually had it on PS2 when we were young, when we were still in high school, you know, and I remember watching him play it and thinking, that's pretty cool. And, you know, then to play it for the first time, so yeah, this was the reason I got an Xbox, was Metal Gear Solid, so I could play Metal Gear Solid 2. And, which I know it was on PS2, but again, at that time, I had no desire to own a Sony system, and now I'm a huge fan of Sony, though I still haven't bought a PS4 yet, but. And later on, yeah, my Xbox did break down, honestly. And I have one now. I actually have an original Xbox, which I don't have an Xbox 360, which is really strange, I know. Someday I'll get one. Maybe when they get down a little lower in price, or if I got one for free or something, who knows. But, yeah, fantastic game. I mean, just the graphics are great. Yeah, a lot of people were like super disappointed about playing as Raiden, but it didn't bother me any, honestly. I mean, it was kind of an interesting take on the story, and you know, and it was so familiar because again, it was basically in a lot of respects, you know, the mission where you play as Raiden is basically a remake of what happened to Shadow Moses, which makes this game really interesting. And yeah, so this was the first way that I ever beat Metal Gear Solid 2 was on here. Later on, would go on to beat it on the PlayStation 3 compilation, Metal Gear Solid HD collection. But yeah, this is my first experience with Metal Gear Solid 2, and you know, wow. Then again, when Metal Gear Solid 3 was coming out to PS2, I had to buy a PS2. That's what got me to buy a PS2. Actually, was Metal Gear Solid 3. I was like, okay, I can't not buy a PS2 now. So what are your top 5 nostalgia games, or just 5 games you're nostalgic about? I'd really love to hear what you guys have to say. Make some videos. I'm supposed to tag some people. Do I really want to tag anybody? Sure, I'll tag And I'm sorry if you've already been tagged, but oh well, whatever, Juggles Retro, I'll tag him. Alec, the side quest gamer, I'll tag him. Ryan Phoenix, the RPG tour guide, I'll tag him. So you guys have been tagged. Maybe you'll make one of these. Maybe you won't. Whatever. Anyways, thanks for watching and keep on gaming. And